With the start of a new school year, city councilors are turning attention once again to concerns about education. Part of that is a request for a closer look at a recent report on high school students falling behind academically. Another concern is the recent problems with school buses. We'd like to welcome as our guest the chair of the council's education committee, Annissa Essaibi-George. Thank you very much for being with us, Councilor.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
I want to start with the thing that you've been probably hearing a lot from parents about over the past couple of weeks, and that's the school buses and not showing up on time, getting there on time. What have they been telling you?
Well, we've had a lot of kids, unfortunately, that haven't been making it to school and haven't been making it to school on time and with proper transportation. We have had a challenge at the start of the school year, and we typically have these blips on the radar when it comes to getting things off to a good start. It just seems that this year has been particularly worse. And unfortunately for any family, for any one family having these challenges with school buses and transportation, it's one too many, and it's a crisis for that particular family. We've gotten calls for buses that have just driven by kids, and we're assuming that that bus didn't have an appropriate monitor to ride along with that child who maybe has some special ed needs that requires a monitor. We've heard of stories where kids aren't getting picked up from before care or after school to be brought to aftercare, where families are already at work and really dependent on those buses and our city's transportation system for our students to happen and to happen the way it's been planned to happen. And then yet other cases where buses are arriving, but arriving 20, 30, 40, up to 70 minutes late. We've received reports missing a significant amount of time. I had an email this afternoon from a parent who's calculated the time that their kid has missed in school so far, and we're only into the first, second, I think, full week of school. This child's missed 5 hours of school already, and that's important academic time for our kids.
Of course, there's all this finger pointing around this. The drivers blame the transportation company. The transportation company says drivers are no-showing. I mean, have you sorted that out at all?
No, and I don't know if we'll ever be able to truly sort it out. We have asked the superintendent and her team to respond to a series of questions so that we can have a better understanding. But we've also asked that my questions specific to the number of buses that haven't been properly staffed with either a bus driver and or a monitor, and what the story is with backup monitors and backup bus drivers, the length of time kids are waiting at bus stops and how tardy they are to school. We've asked for that information, but we've also asked it, I've asked for it, not right now. I think it's most important that the school department figure out how we're getting our kids to school, that we're getting them to school on time, and realizing how important it is to get kids to school on time, and not just for that first class, not just for that first period, for that first bell, but in time to have breakfast, for that time to adjust, to unload their backpack, to get situated in the classroom, because so much of that experience for our kids is so critically important to their success in the classroom for the rest of the day. And if we have a situation with a student who is one of our special ed kids that requires a monitor, that maybe needs some behavioral support, that needs to be transitioned properly, when they're waiting at the bus stop for and I've said that the timeline should be no child should be later than 10 minutes with the bus. And I think about that as a parent. I think about how long I can wait and how long of a window we may have in the morning or in the afternoon. When I think about how that impacts that child's transition into their classroom day, we have to be so sensitive to that. And we have to realize the responsibility we have as a city, the responsibility that the transportation department has to our kids, and what we're doing to support our children and their families at the start of the school year.
And one thing I remember about students with learning disabilities, you got to look out for their safety because they could wander into the street. They have to watch them very closely, don't they?
Yeah, and unfortunately some of the cases that we've seen with students are ones that are assigned one-on-one monitors. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason they've been assigned that one-on-one monitor. We have to be responsive to that. We have to be responsible to that commitment that we've made to the child and to that child's family.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Boston City Councilor Annissa Essaibi-George. Councilor, another education matter you're looking into is about this report early this year about high school students who are falling off track and maybe not graduating. How bad is this?
Well, it's not good when any child isn't graduating from high school. And in our schools, our teachers, I'm a former high school teacher in Boston, that's our charge, is to get kids to graduation, to get them there in a productive way, make sure that they're learning while they're with us for sure, and also developing the skills that they need, the academic knowledge to be successful, the skills that they need to be successful after graduation, post-graduation. So it's important that we're making sure that our high schools are structured in a way that supports those kids and supports the work that's happening in our schools, and that we're responsive as a city council, as the committee that I'm lucky enough to chair on education, but the work that we're doing as a council and the work that we're doing as a city, that we're supporting those kids to graduation and making sure that the data that we're looking at is also looked at with the right lenses, and that we're taking those experiences, that we're taking that information and applying it to policy on the city level that makes sense for those kids to support them while they're in our high school system.
One observation I remember from the report is they're saying there are a lot of students who are on track when they finish grade 8, but somehow in high school they're getting off track, and people aren't noticing that. Well, what do you take away from that?
Well, it's that saying, when kids fall through the cracks, and it often happens very silently. And in those high school years in particular, those adolescent years, it's so important that we are en masse focused on our kids, focused on supporting their needs, supporting their academic needs, because our kids can rise to those academic challenges, no doubt, but making sure that we're also coming with the tools that they need for their emotional support, for their mental health well-being, for their physical health well-being, and that we're providing those supports. And we've talked about, I think, some of the missing pieces over the 2.5 years that I've been on the council, and I know many of my colleagues have talked about it longer than that. But the work that we need to do and the pieces that are missing to make sure kids aren't slipping through the cracks, like full-time nurses in all of our school buildings, like full-time school psychologists on staff in our school buildings, to be there to support that academic experience and to make sure kids aren't slipping away, because it happens very quickly, it happens very silently sometimes, but the signs are there if we have the tools that we need to pay attention to those kids in that holistic way, in that full way.
And I know the report says at least one school does it better than the others, but you have another gap that you're looking at, and that's not during high school, but right after. You have students with diplomas, and then they seem to go out of sight.
Yeah.
What do you see there?
Well, we focus a lot on graduation rates in the city of Boston, and we should. That's a really important data point in getting more and more kids to that graduation point. We do have within that group of kids that are graduating from the Boston Public Schools, they're getting to graduation day, they're having that academic success, they're being accepted to college. And when we're graduating them, we're applauding them, we're celebrating them, and we're sending them off into the college world. But then there's a small group of students who aren't showing up at school in September, that something is happening over the summer, that we're not fully supporting them and continuing to support them, because they're our kids. We should be committed to them post-graduation. And there are some great organizations that do that work. The Boston Private Industry Council does some of this exit survey work and tracks our kids, but we're finding that they aren't ending up in school as planned in September. And those homeschool communities, so the high school that they graduated from, those teachers know them the best. How do we make sure that they can maintain some connection to their graduates? Because we know as well that any successful high school graduate is going to come back and support the young people that will come after him or her. And we want to make sure those are abundant success stories that can be shared.
Well, aside from the community work, you've got some forums that are planned about education as well, right?
I do. I have a series of, I think it's 15 town halls across the city, including one that will be student only and one that will be teacher only, between kicking off next week, September 25th, and happening in September, October, and November. I'm really excited to get to it. I think it'll be some really productive presentations, but most importantly, I think some really helpful commentary and comments and testimony from the residents, from parents, from kids, from teachers, from community members that are really interested in the success of our schools and understanding that what happens in the Boston Public Schools has a tremendous impact on the city as a whole, not just on families who have kids in BPS, but on the community at large, the city at large. So I look forward to I think I worded it recently at a community meeting. I look forward to hearing about the celebrations that we have within BPS, but also and expect to hear quite a bit about the challenges, the issues, the complaints about what's happening in BPS. But also hearing about those solutions, because I think those that our kids for sure, our teachers for sure, our parents for sure, know what some of the solutions need to be to make BPS an even better system than it already is.
Well, starting with your first term in council, you were very interested in the opioids crisis, and one of the things you're going to be looking at down the road is the possibility of a new Long Island bridge. What are you going to be doing exactly?
Yeah, so we have a hearing on October 2nd, and the anniversary of the Long Island Bridge closure is October 8th. So we thought it was important that we hear from the administration on the plans to date. We did a few months ago, got an update on the process so far, and looking now, since some other things have happened with the administration and our facilities department and the planning that's been ongoing behind the scenes, bringing it forward, especially on the hearing will be on October 2nd. The anniversary is October 8th. So on the eve of that anniversary, hearing from the administration on the work that's happened so far and understanding what the roadmap is, and I guess no pun intended, the roadmap on this bridge to Long Island, on repairing that bridge and returning some significant recovery services that we so desperately need in the city of Boston and what we really need for the region.
Now, of course, up to this time still, there has been this debate. Is it better to have recovery out on the island where it's isolated, or is it better to have it closer to the communities? Are you going to be replaying some of that debate as well?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the answer lies in a combination of both of those things. We are missing some real resources and the sort of the quality and the depth of relationship that happens in recovery. We haven't been able to replicate that exactly within the city and within some very concentrated parts of our city. Again, I continue to say it is more than just about Long Island when we think about recovery, when we think about the impact that addiction has had on so many of our city's residents, on our Commonwealth's residents, and really on the nation as a whole. It is more than just Long Island. Long Island is simply a piece of the puzzle of the missing work that we need to make sure that we're able to provide as a city and as a region. But the work needs to continue across the Commonwealth. Communities need to be a partner in this work. When we think about addiction, we think about recovery and helping those that are in active addiction find recovery, a lifetime of recovery. We need those partners. We need Long Island, and we also need the communities and the cities and towns around the city of Boston to participate.
Finally, one other issue you looked at earlier this year was payments in lieu of taxes by nonprofits, which could mean anything from hospitals, universities, and colleges. Should they be doing more, at least some of them?
Yes, unequivocally yes, and that is my shortest answer, I think, of the afternoon here with you. We need our nonprofit partners to do more, to be more supportive, especially when it comes to the cash contributions that they make to the city. So many of the institutions and the universities and the hospitals do their part when it comes to the community benefits piece, but we're still missing a very important component. We don't have partners that are at 100% the way that we would like to, both for the cash benefits, but then also in the reporting and sharing the information about how they're participating in pilot. These institutions play a very important role in our city, and I would say that our city is a place that they want to be. We need that a greater active partnership when it comes to those cash contributions for the pilot programs. We had a hearing not long ago. Councilor Edwards and I co-sponsored that hearing and had many guests at the table to share their experiences, their hopes for pilot going forward. But two themes that came from that hearing was, one, getting our nonprofit partners to participate 100% in the reporting piece. We need to get them to that point, but also evaluating the pilot plan as it stands now. Is there an opportunity to rewrite that? A missing component for me in that current report is the jobs piece. I'd like to know how many of our city's residents are employed by these great institutions, and what's the quality of job that and wage that those universities, those hospitals, those nonprofit institutions, the cultural institutions, how much are they paying our people, our residents in the city of Boston to work in those to work in those institutions.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
City Councilor Annissa Essaibi-George. In a moment, preserving and passing on the legacy of hip-hop in Boston. We'll tell you about a collaboration between UMass Boston and the Boston Public Library.